In 1833, Britain abolished slavery. And to make it happen, the British government borrowed money, a lot of money, 20 million pounds, which in today's value is approximately 2 billion pounds with a B. Now, here is the question I want you to sit with. Who did they pay that money to? Not the enslaved, not the families of the people who had been bought and sold and worked to death for 200 years. They paid it to the slave owners as a compensation for losing their property. And that loan, the loan that was taken out to compensate the people who owned human beings, was not fully paid. It was never fully paid off by British taxpayers until 2015. 2015. Your parents' generation was still paying off a debt to slave owners. And now, in 2026, when Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, and others go to the United Nations and say we deserve some form of reparatory justice for what was done to our people, Reform UK, they said, dare to ask and we will ban your visas. I have a lot to say about this, and that's waiting they happen this very day. Let me tell you exactly what happened because you need to understand this clearly. In March 2026, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution. It declared the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity. It called for a global framework for reparatory justice. It was led by Ghana, backed by the African Union and the Caribbean community. And within weeks, Reform UK, Nigel Farage's party, announced it would block all new visas for citizens of any country formally demanding reparations from Britain. Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, Kenya, Barbados, Haiti, Guyana, 19 countries in total. The proposal would trigger a total freeze on visa issuance for any country that establishes a reparations committee or submit a formal claim for redress to the British government. Think about that for a moment. What that means in practice is what I want you to think about. Students who had nothing to do with any diplomatic decision, nurses, workers, families trying to reunite, all of them potentially bad, not because of anything they did, but because their government dared to ask a question about history. Reform UK currently has only 8 members in the UK Parliament. They have 8 members of Parliament, but they are leading opinion polls. Note that, take note of that. They are leading opinion polls ahead of the 2029 general election. This is not a fringe position. This could be government policy in 3 years. Now, Reform UK's argument is this. Britain was the first major power to abolish slavery, so it should be celebrated, not punished. And I want to address that seriously because it deserves a serious answer. Yes, Britain abolished the transatlantic slave trade in 1807 and slavery itself in 1833. That is historical fact, and it matters. But here is what they leave out every single time. Britain did not abolish slavery because it suddenly developed a conscience. It abolished it after 2 centuries of profit. 2 centuries during which the British economy was built substantially on enslaved labor, the sugar that sweetened British tea, the cotton that powered British mills, the tobacco, the rum, all of it produced by people who were owned. When Britain ended slavery in 1833, the slaveholders were compensated, not the enslaved. The British government took out a loan to pay slave owners for losing their human property. That loan took until 2015 to fully repay. So, the British taxpayer, including black British citizens, including children of the Caribbean and African diaspora living in the UK, was paying off a debt to slave owners well into the 21st century. The enslaved receiving nothing. Their descendants received nothing. And now, when those descendants, through their governments, go to the United Nations and say, this history deserves acknowledgement and some form of justice, the response is, how dare you? We will ban your visas. The head of the CARICOM Reparations Commission described the proposal as tragic, saying it echoes attitudes from the era when emancipation itself was resisted. He is right. The logic is the same. Pay nothing, acknowledge nothing, and punish anyone who dare asks. And it is not just the UK. On January 21st, 2026, the United States, their government indefinitely paused the issuance of all immigrant visas, green cards, for nationals of 75 countries, including Nigeria, Ghana, Jamaica, and Barbados. In April 2026, the US limited tourist and business visas for Nigeria and Ghana to single entry, 3 months validity, different country, different stated reasons, same countries being targeted, same people feeling the effect. Reform UK tied its proposal to reparations. The US tied its restrictions to security screening and reciprocity. The language is different, but look at the list of countries. Look at who is being locked out and ask yourself, is this coincidence? We are living in a moment where the same communities that were historically extracted from their labor, their resources, their people are now being told they are too much of a burden to let in. That is not immigration policy. That is a continuation of a very old story told with new vocabulary. And here is where I stand. And I want to be very clear once again. I am not naive enough to think reparations is a simple issue. It is not. The question of how much, to whom, in what form, administered by who, these are genuinely complex. Reasonable people can disagree on the mechanism, but here is what is not complex. The wealth that built modern Britain, the financial institutions, the infrastructure, the global power was substantially built on the labor of enslaved Africans and on the extraction of colonial resources. That is not opinion. That is documented economic history. To ask for acknowledgement of that, for some form of justice, is not an ethnic grievance. It is not a shakedown. It is not Britain being treated as an ATM. It is people asking to be seen, asking for their history to be acknowledged, asking for the record to be straight. They wanted that record set straight. And the response from a party that wants to be the next government of this country is ask again, and we will close the door. If you are Nigerian and living in the UK right now, this should matter to you personally, because the same party proposing to ban your visa over reparations is the same party that has consistently pushed for stricter immigration rules, faster deportations, and fewer rights for people like you. These things are connected. They are always connected. Make I talk am for pidgin, so nobody go miss from the tori. Dem use our great grandparents build their wealth. Dem no pay us shishi. Now we dey ask for acknowledgement. Dem wan come begin dey ban our visa. The audacity, the absolute audacity. So, what do you do with this information if you are sitting in the UK right now? First, understand the political landscape you are living in. Reform UK is not government yet, but they are rising. The 2029 election is not far. What happens in Britain politics between now and then matters for every Nigerian, every African, every person of Caribbean heritage living in this country. Secondly, use your voice. If you are a British citizen, vote. If you are eligible to become a British citizen, seriously consider it. Your presence in this country is not just economic, it is political. And political power requires participation. Third, know your history, because the people who want to dismiss reparations are counting on you not knowing the full story. When you know that slave owners were compensated and the enslaved were not, when you know that debt was paid off in 2015, you cannot be silenced with a simple get over it. You cannot get over what has never been properly acknowledged. They abolished slavery. Then they sent the bill to the slave owners and compensated them for losing people they had no right to own in the first place. And now, nearly 200 years later, when the descendants of the enslaved ask for justice, the answer is a visa ban. We deserve better than that. We have always deserved better than that. Share this episode if it made you think. Subscribe if you want to keep having these conversations, because this is the kind of conversations that mainstream media will not have for you. It is the kind of conversation that the diaspora needs to be having for itself. My name is Samuel. This is Wetin Dey Happen. And that, my friends, in the entire diaspora, is Wetin Dey Happen.